It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here and to be able to say a few words on behalf of EuroPD, of which Simon has been an integral part for the best of the last 25 years or so. So I'm sure most of you will have heard about EuroPD or even attended a meeting organized by EuroPD, but I'm pretty sure at the same time that not many of you are really familiar with what EuroPD actually is and what it does and what its structure is. So I brought 4 or 5 slides to actually tell you a bit more about the basics. And then the bigger part of my presentation, I'm going to take you a bit down memory lane to the beginnings and up to the modern times, of course with the specific focus of what Simon has contributed all over these years. So who are we? EuroPD was formed initially back in 1993, so more than 30 years ago, as sort of a loose coalition of PD enthusiasts from 2 centers, from the Cardiff Center, Nick is here, John William at the time, and Jerry Coles, and from Berlin, my boss at the time, Gerhard Gahl, and myself. And it took us nearly 10 years to get all formalized, and we created then a non-profit association which was registered as a charity with the registry court in Berlin, Germany, and John Williams was elected as the first president. Basically, we did that with the growing size and number of meetings. We realized that as 5, 6 individuals, if one of the meetings would go belly up, because there would be an airline strike, a terrorist threat, or whatever, then we would be personally liable. And after nearly 10 years, we thought, no, that's not going on. But basically, what are our aims? That is basically taken from the Constitution. We want to promote and expand the knowledge and also the application of peritoneal dialysis, but also other home therapies in the treatment of chronic terminal renal failure. And we want to support scientific research and education in PD. And the main vehicle to achieve that are the EuroPD meetings, which we typically hold every 2nd year with few exceptions, for example, where we have joint meetings with the ISPD. And we do that in conjunction with a local organizing group, a local team from the city and the country where we're going, and also in collaboration with the national societies. And as nephrology conferences go, we have invited lectures, symposia, masterclasses, posted in free columns. We also have, for many years, a formal cooperation with EuroPD and with ISPD, with which we have organized a joint conference. And we're also supporting or organizing smaller meetings in the field of home therapies. That could be meetings in person, in smaller frame, or virtual meetings to greater audiences. We also support research activities. I mentioned that, and I just point out 2 of the major things. We are partners in 2 major EU grants of the past years. The first was EuTriPD, European Training and Research in PD, which acquired from the Horizon program of the EU 3.2 million euros over a period of 5 years. And that, to my knowledge, was the first major EU-sponsored project dedicated to PD. And so in retrospect, that was a big milestone. And the subsequent project, the follow-up project, IMPROVE-PD, has acquired over 4 million euros and has been running from 2018 to 22. And I hope that with Horizon 2025, there will be another follow-up of that. But let us go back to the beginnings. Why did we get together? Why did we come to the idea that we should create just another meeting? And I think it was sort of the frustration with the fact that in the early 90s, when you attended major nephrology meetings such as the EuroPD, ISN, ASN, whatever, there was very limited coverage of PD. And specifically, during the 30th EuroPD meeting in Glasgow in 1993, Glasgow, UK, the motherland of peritoneal dialysis at the time, more than 40% of patients doing that sort of treatment, there was very limited coverage of PD. And I sat in the Glasgow pub with Nick Topliat one evening, and we decided that why don't we do a small meeting just for PD? And we went back to our home units, talked to our bosses, and they said, just go, get something started. And we did go, and we approached the companies, the 3 major companies in the market. Cool reception from most of them, but Fresenius gave us some support. And actually, in 1994, in March, we had a meeting which we termed at the time not EuroPD, because we didn't think it would be a series of events. We thought it was a one-off. So we called it Adequacy of PD. And what can I say? It was a big success, 660 participants, good talks. And after the meeting, everyone was over us. We should continue another meeting, the companies were coming, offering the support and so forth. And so we next moved to Norbert Lamer, already at the time one of the grand seigneurs of European nephrology, everyone will know him. And together with him, we had the second meeting, which we called then the second European Peritoneal Dialysis meeting in Ghent. And needless to say, Simon was there already for the first two meetings and presented papers there. I did have some discussions with John because he was adamant that this was the third EuroPD meeting, because he had held a meeting a couple of years before in the White House in London, but no one else was involved outside Cardiff. So at the end of the day, we decided the numbering would begin with 2. By the way, it was the time internet was just in its early stages, so it was not that easy to get people together. So emailing was just beginning to come out, and the fax was still very prominent. And also photography, there was the pre-smartphone era. And I took that photo from John Williams because he was very proud of being, as a nephrologist, the team doctor of the Welsh rugby team for the World Cup in 2011, I think. We then moved to Scotland, to Edinburgh, and to Madrid, Spain, for the next 2 meetings with Robin Winnie and Rafa Salgas as the local conference presidents. And there, and that has been mentioned before, we of course invited Simon to talk about his topic at the time. And this has been mentioned before, what really happens to Paystone PD. So that was the focus at the time, and that has been later published as a full paper in Kidney International. So naturally, at the end of 2000, we then approached Simon and asked him to join the group and become a member of EuroPD. And during the ASN Renal Week in Toronto in October 2000, he agreed, and he was elected vice president of EuroPD and has been with us ever since. Something else important happened, because during those meetings, we also had the help of a certain Margaret Cherry, who had the Fresh company founded in conference, and with her help as a professional conference organizer, we were very happy. She did a brilliant job, and she has been with us ever since, and she's actually organizing also this Festschrift here. Several meetings followed. I don't need to go into details for each and every one of them, but this one is probably worth a specific mention, because that was the first joint ISPD EuroPD meeting in 2004 in Amsterdam with Rick Creed as the Congress president, and there were nearly 2,500 people from all over the world attending, which was a huge thing for a PD meeting at the time. We also moved to Czech Republic, to Helsinki, Finland, and to Strasbourg in France, where Michel Fischbach, the first pediatric nephrologist, was then actually the Congress president. And during that, at the end of that meeting, John Williams retired from the group, and Nick Topley, who was sitting there in the back, was elected the new EuroPD president. For the 10th EuroPD meeting, we then for the first time came to England, second time to the UK. And this meeting, with Nick as the EuroPD president and Simon as the Congress president, was not only notable for Simon conducting with his border singers the opening plenary, but also for having home dialysis for the first time included in the programs. The first 9 meetings were just PD. But I have to say, among the many positive attitudes and things associated with Simon, one thing has been omitted so far, and that is his farsightedness. So his ability to view above and beyond the horizon. And he realized early that we can't just focus on PD when we want to do home therapies, because there's patients on PD who will not be able to continue for some reason, filtration failure, whatever. So do we have a second offer for them to do therapy at home? And naturally then, home therapy with companies coming with new products at the time was something very important. And Home Hemo has been with us in the program ever since. The next meetings were in Maastricht in Holland, and that was a joint thing between the German and the Dutch Society of Nephrology with Karel Leunis and Jürgen Fleuge as the joint presidents. And for the Krakow meeting, EuroPD is proud to say that we came up with something pretty new. So we were among the first renal conferences to get rid of the blinds of poster boards. And we introduced electronic posters. And that's what we have been doing since, and not all the meetings, all the big meetings are actually moving to that. So finally, at the next meeting in Dublin, Nick Topley retired from the group, and then Simon was elected as EuroPD president in Dublin in November 2017, and he has fulfilled the role until a very short time ago. And those 6 people on the right hand of that picture, that is presently the still working core group of EuroPD. The first meeting with Simon as the EuroPD president was held in Ljubljana in Slovenia, and that was notable from my point of view for his plenary lecture he gave, and that was entitled EuroPD Quo Vadis. But it was not about EuroPD really, it was about home therapies. And that's what I mean with foresightedness. So he realized that if you want to get the therapy forward, we need to think, for example, about the next generation of young doctors who would be interested in home therapies. Because, at least in Germany, but also in many other countries, so the exposure of young nephrologists to home therapies is very, very poor. And that basically has culminated in 2 major projects he has been driving off, and that is to think about the next generation, to actively approach young doctors in the different countries who we have met, who we have read papers from, who we identified as potential future leaders, and to get them together, well, we named it a bit high-flying young ambassadors of home therapies, but to get them together as the next generation when we all retire and are not doing home therapies anymore, to follow in our track. And the most recent project was the EuroPD Policy Forum on Home Therapies. There was a meeting with more than 100 participants from all interest groups, patients, industry, doctors, nurses, in the Bruges meeting. And that is to identify areas of urgent need for action. So we are afraid that dialysis providers might lose interest in creating products for home therapies because the margin of income is probably not what they expect, and the market is relatively small, at least in developed countries. So how do we approach those? And then the patient, we have heard about empowering the patient so that they have a say, that they understand that they can decide, if not very unusual circumstances, prohibit one or the other therapy. They can decide what is their treatment. And then, of course, the ever-growing problem of education of professionals and lack of staffing. So that are the topics, and this is probably one of the major things we will have to address in the upcoming meetings and in the following years. It has been mentioned just previously that Simon was also a big driver behind EuroPD supporting the Saving Young Lives initiative. The only income EuroPD generates is from the conferences, if there is some surplus. So we have no membership fees, we have no constant corporate members who come with money outside the direct support of a meeting. So that was a bit of a problem for us, but we did that for 5 years. But Simon personally has involved himself in the training of these doctors, in receiving doctors to be trained and so on. And I think this is also speaking to his broader view of nephrology and dialysis as a whole, that is not limited to his doorstep and to England, to Europe or whatever. And of course, and that has been already mentioned at length, he's a great clinical scientist, also involved in a lot of projects at the interface between clinical science and basic science, and he is also a project leader in the big IMPROVE-PD project. So he has also had the task of leading us through the dark years, the COVID years. So we had planned ISPD EuroPD meeting for May 2020 in the Scottish Exhibition Conference Centre in Glasgow, but then COVID-19 came over us. And this had to be postponed. The SEC was on Nightingale Hospital, so no way that any meeting could be held. And so together with the ISPD people, we decided to postpone the meeting and then had it as a fully virtual meeting early March 2021. And again, that was a big success. You can see here from the closing session where Simon and Martin presented the numbers. We had 1,462 participants, lots of papers presented. So it works online, but of course it's a different pair of shoes if you meet in person. And so we were very happy that last year in November we could convene and meet again in person in Bruges, in that beautiful city, where we had a very nice meeting, which was smaller than the previous pre-COVID meetings, but we see that as a new promising start. And at that very meeting, Simon then retired as the EuroPD president, and he passed the baton to Wim van Biesen from Ghent in Belgium, who is now the current president. But we are very happy that Simon has agreed not to leave the group entirely, but he is still with us and will continue to advance our course as a vice president. So for all this, what you have contributed and will contribute in the days to come, I can only say thank you, Simon. Token of memory, on behalf of EuroPD, I might present this to hang in whatever office you want to hang in.
Thank you very much.
That has been created by Margaret. She was very
Fantastic, isn't it? Very nice. So, well, that was a very thorough description, and it's been a marvellous experience with you. Anyone else want to say anything? Me?
I just, as a former president and one of the beginners of EuroPD, it would never have grown to what it was without you. That's absolutely clear. There was a sea change in the amount of clinical material within the meeting. It really started as a basic science into clinical, and it's now a clinical meeting which has basic science feeding into it.
Yes, I think that's
I can only congratulate you on where you've taken it.
I've always thought that was my remit, is to bring the clinical into basic science, and that was very cool. Okay, we should move on. Thank you very much.